There's a new role emerging in these insurance brokerages, which is somebody who is very tightly aligned with ops and tightly aligned with the C-suite, if you will, if that is taking the goal of the directive of the company and translating it into what is the business outcome needed to achieve that. That ops role is changing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm beyond excited to welcome our today's guest, Margo Giles, to the Insurance Leaders Lab podcast. Margo is a seasoned leader with over 17 years of executive experience in insurance operations and digital transformation. Before founding Iris, she ran a commercial insurance brokerage for nearly a decade. She grew its revenue through strategic SaaS-based automation and customer-centric technology. Margo is globally recognized as a thought leader in InsurTech. She was awarded InsurTech Woman CEO of the Year and InsurTech Influencer of the Year. She's also an NIC FinTech Women Inspiring Founder of 2024 and an Insurance Business America Elite Woman winner. As CEO of Iris InsurTech, Margo now leads the insurance distribution revolution. Iris is an AI native platform facilitating operations, dynamic data exchange, and embedded financial solutions to dismantle legacy constraints and empower independent agencies to scale with precision and effectively. Driven by a passion for advancing the insurance industry, Margo is deeply committed to fostering opportunities for women. She's a founding member of Insure Women and Insure Equality. She also serves as the Florida Network Chair of the Association of Professional Insurance Women and the Chair of the Insurance Agency Owners Alliance Tech Council. Wow! I couldn't wish for a better guest to open the Insurance Leaders Lab Tech Series. Good morning, Margo.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for finding the time to speak with me today.
That was a long intro. We gotta shorten that down.
Okay, you need to shorten that out a little bit. That's true. But listen, it's all well deserved.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
These are fantastic accolades. Margot,
Yes.
let me begin our conversation by expressing my deep respect for your courage and energy in advocating for better technology solutions in the insurance industry.
Thank you.
Thousands, if not millions of insurance agents and CSRs are fortunate to have you on their side, even if they don't know you yet. I'm
Not
sure they
yet.
will. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
I had the pleasure of listening to you speak at various industry events, and I'm always impressed by the depth and clarity of your vision for the future of insurance agents. Would you like to share how it all started for you?
I've always been an entrepreneur. That's been in my DNA since I was little. But when it came to insurance specifically, it was really sitting in the chair first as a CSR, and single-handedly in Florida. You're also in run ops in Florida, and anybody else in California or Texas or New York or any of our problem child states knows that with all that regulation and change, a lot of times it falls on our entry level employees to really navigate what that
True.
looks like in order to deliver insurance. And so just being frustrated at being a young woman in insurance in general is a little bit always an outlier if those two things together. And then, using technology in my daily life when I would leave the office, cell phone being able to do all of my banking and all these adult financial transactions that I was able to do really easily. And then going into work the next day and having to write everything down on a piece of paper and scan it and fax it to someone. There was just such a huge disconnect I felt, especially my generation, that millennial generation of we kind of the bridge between the old
Yeah.
and the new just in general.
Yeah.
And I just really frustrated that I couldn't work as fast as I wanted to and as smart as I wanted to. I felt like I was being constrained by the tech that I had available to me. So I think that was like if through all the things that I've done in my career, that was really the catalyst, almost like this fueled by anger of like, why am I doing it this way? And why can't it be done a better way?
Okay. And what happened then?
And then
From there to where you are today.
yeah, just taking action on that whenever I could, even like again, starting as a service representative and then moving up through the value chain in the insurance agency and eventually becoming head of ops. When I really moved into the ops role, that's when I felt like I had the authority to sort of make some of those changes. I think I went into it very naively. So I thought, and I see this right now with other agency owners and ops, especially now the AI is here. They're like, oh, we could vibe code that and we could build that on our own. And I just see myself,
I wish we could.
15 years ago going, how hard could it be to build an AMS? This is so easy. I'm gonna get rid of everything we have and we're gonna build our own. And I see that now happening, but I think it was born of that naivety that I could just do it. But on the same hand, it took me on a 10-year journey of actually learning how to do it. And so moving through ops and advocating that our agency set aside money and time to invest in technology, which up until that point had not been any kind of initiative from ownership. And then eventually being able to deploy some really cool tools, being on the commercial construction book. That's really where I focus a lot of my
Uh-huh,
time.
uh-huh.
If anybody writes that business, it's E&S. It's really heavy on paper. It's really long wait times. There's a lot of data going between brokers and the insured, just all the things, right? So going through that process and being able to deploy some tools. One of the very first things that we ever deployed, now remember this old back in the day, was this tool around COIs. So, we
Okay.
as a construction,
For
agency,
construction, of course, yeah.
lots of COIs, big
Mhm.
problem. At the time, 10, 15 years ago, this was a very manual process. It still is for some agencies, a very manual process, but basically being able to do that very quickly, setting up an inbox that we could automate and send those COIs out for the ones that didn't require language really quickly within 24 hours turnaround. So there were some things that we set up, but once you start, it's like a slippery slope. Once we started building those tools, then we wanted to build more and more. And really, what ended up happening is realizing that the core of our operating system and the core of our data was preventing us from really being able to scale and fly with some of these tools. And so that catalyst was the big part of me deciding to learn all about building operating systems and AMSs. Eventually, I ended up purchasing the agency and running that agency for many years. And as chief operating officer, just kept plugging away at the technology and chipping away at
Mhm.
what didn't work and replacing it with what did work. And through that process, obviously learning and failing on my own. We deployed a lot of tools that were not great. We made a lot of mistakes, but we learned from those and never thought of technology as a one time thing, always thought about it as something that we would grow and grow over time. And then, yeah, several years into that, decided we were going to have a big exit and sold a lot of that asset. And then I got to focus and pivot on really building technology, which was becoming very quickly my passion, and something that I felt very strongly needed to happen, and did that in a consulting basis. And then eventually, everything I learned up to that point, decided in 2023, I'm going to pull the trigger and I'm going to build the operating system that I know that this industry really needs. And that is how Iris was born.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful segue into my next question about Iris. You
Yes.
call it AI native platform.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit more about what does that really mean?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And what it means has changed in the last 6 months. If anybody's following the development of AI and understanding how quickly these tools are moving, when we first built the AI portion of Iris, which happened in early 25, what we meant by AI native was like there are going to be tools that are just embedded fundamentally in the AMS or the operating system, whichever nomenclature you choose to use to call it, that were just inherently happening. So a lot of that revolved around the analytics and reporting portion of Iris. So, if you run a book of business report, our AI can tell you, insights, anomalies that might be happening. It can tell you next best steps. I can never say that one fast. So got me on that in the morning. But so it can tell you your next best steps. That to me is not something that I want an insurance agency to have to build or customize on their own. That's what I mean by AI native. There are parts and
Mhm.
workflows and automations that we just know inherently because we're insurance people need to exist, and they don't need to be tweaked by the tenant or the insurance agency or brokerage that's using the software. But I think in the last 6 months, as we've seen the rise of agentic AI, so I'm thinking about that as sort of embedded native AI functionality, decisioning and things like that. As
Mhm.
we moved into agentic AIs, you start to see things like Claude come on to the insurance ecosystem. OpenClaw, if you're a developer and understand what OpenClaw has been doing, I felt like there was actually a secondary part of being AI native, which is, does your platform anticipate and or build for the fact that the AI agents will now be interfacing with it and not just human agents interfacing. So we think of an AMS or an operating system as something that's very human driven. We type into it, we move data around in it, we add stuff to it. And I started to think in late 2025, well, hey, I see a very quickly approaching future where agentic AI agents will be actually in and moving the platform data, moving it from your email, moving the data into the operating system, potentially moving it out to Raiders and eSign and all the things that we need to do to actually create a workflow end to end. And AI native now to me means, is the system prepared for that future? And it's not
Mhm.
sexy, but it's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to happen for an operating system to be able to easily interface with agentic AI agents. And so to me, that's where we're moving towards with Iris.
That's very, very interesting. And of course, it's moving, as you just said, it's
So
moving
fast.
so fast. So we don't really have a crystal ball, and it's so hard to say what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But from
I
the
have grand
iris,
plans
yeah,
for insurance for the next 5 years.
I know, I know. But I can share with you like my own thinking and
Yeah,
experience from the kind of adopting AI and new technology into the operations. What I would love to see is something that is, I think that's something called open system, whereas there are so many wonderful tools or apps or solutions,
yeah,
call them whatever is the best here, right? But they are all fragmented. This tool allows me to, I don't know, compare different options, different
right.
quotes. This one does amazing policy checking. This one pulls the data from wherever and inputs it all into my Accord. But they usually require that my CSR go there, go
Log
here,
into
log in
17.
there, log in there, log in there. So now we have 15 logins plus our main AMS plus something else plus DocuSign, right? And they are like, Nina, thank you very much. That's it. Can we have a one, right? So here is the question. Is your platform allowing for some plugin opportunity so that you are the foundation and
Yeah.
then we build on it?
Yes, and that's really what I said when we said, "Okay, we're gonna prepare for a future of AI," which really the future of this is integrating data across multiple, like, if you're going down to the technical layer, what you're asking for is, how can I quickly move information from my operating system to this application and back
Yeah.
so that I can have this seamless experience without having to copy and paste and move, or even, God forbid, type, right? Every time I wanna use a tool, I'm typing in the same information, which is
Mhm.
kind of where we're at today. I'm gonna go down a little bit of a path, okay? So stick with me. I would say there's really 2 components to this. There's a technical component. Do we have the technology to allow for an operating system like you see in Android or Apple that can be, you can have applications and you kinda have them in this one place, which is what everybody is describing. Yes, that is the goal of Iris. There are many technical tools that are being put in place to do that. That is not where I see the biggest problem with this future that we're trying to go after. The consistently what I see when we go into insurance agencies and brokerages is what you described, which is the 72 things and all of that. What that says to me is we don't have a cohesive strategy as to what we're driving the business towards. In my experience, this is how you end up with like 72 efficiency tools that actually, if you aggregated everything together and looked at the cost versus the time, isn't really delivering the overall experience that we want to have. So it's not more tools, more things, right? Because you can do that. But if you're not able to look at cohesively, like how is it moving the business forward, then it's just a bunch of tools, which doesn't always aggregate into something that's really fundamental, comprehensive, and moves the needle.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is actually this lack of, and I'm getting ready to release, I made like a visual of this, which is like, what are the actual skills in the future that an insurance agency or brokerage is going to need and how it looks different than the skills today. There's this new skill arising and it's almost like a strategy skill. We'll use an example. I'm an insurance agency. I plan on growing through, right? I've got a little bit of backing. I want to spend $10 million on acquisitions this year. I want to grow my revenue through acquisition. As a company, this is our goal and our objective. The tools that you will need to execute that are very different and that in that strategy than the tools that you would need to execute a 20% organic growth, right?
Absolutely. Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and everybody asks for the same, like, I want quoting faster, I want binding faster, I want the data to fill my accords. To me, these are like really, really, really micro processes, but a lot of micro processes put together that aren't driving towards your macro business goal are not going to deliver anything to you. And I see this over and over again in insurance agencies. They're asking for these micro processes, but they don't have a vision as to where they want the company to go.
Well, I can speak to it from my
Yeah.
operations perspective. It's not that I am asking for microprocesses. I'm actually given microprocesses.
True.
People
Yep.
want to sell to me microprocesses. That's
Yeah.
one thing.
Yes.
I am looking for the comprehensive solution, but I am given like, okay, I have a wonderful this small piece here, and I have a
Yeah.
wonderful this small solution here. With that said, from the strategy perspective, I love how you put it. It's important to see where you're going and how you're going to get there. But I think it would be fair to say for most people, at least half of active dynamic agencies, what they want to do is they want to grow the business organically. Most of them don't have just a small backup of 10, 20 million, but they want to grow
Some
it
of true.
organically and without growing their headcount exponentially. Yes, the task for me as an operations is how do we do more with the same amount of people and not overload them, right? So here is AI and automation comes into play.
And then, I'll give you a really good example of designing a process for a future that no longer exists. Okay. So Iris has obviously the platform, but we also have professional services. So we can come in and we can do the assessments. We can tell you what automation, because that is, by the way, a huge critical
Yes,
component that's missing in a lot
absolutely.
of
Mhm.
providers. We've never had a future where these tools are available. We can't expect insurance agencies and brokerage owners to just wake up and understand how this all works, right? And then deploy it. But building for a future that no longer exists. So I'm giving a specific example. So a lot of times document generation is a big part of insurance, right? Whether it's Accord documents, proposal documents, privacy statements, BORs, whatever. There a lot of times one of the biggest pain points is I have a document and I have information. I need that information to go on that document and I need that document to go somewhere, either to an insured or a carrier or a broker, insert whatever. So we get a lot of feature requests at Iris. So we need document gen. We need these. If you think about the old mail merge, I need
Mhm.
to put a document template in a library and I need to drag and drop the name, the policy number, and I needed to pre-fill everything and I need to send it out. I'm like, okay, that is designing for a yesterday issue because what we do now, what can be done now is a chat interface where you say, "Dear chat, my privacy statement for Nina Shepherd needs to go out today at 5 o'clock. Can you do that?" That's real. That happens now. You can do that in Claude. You can do that in Chat GPT. So instead of building a process that says, I need a screen, then I need the template, then I need the people, because this is how we've always done it, we said, well, that process sounds great, but we actually don't need those features anymore because the outcome you're actually looking for is how quickly can I get information from my AMS onto a document? And moving the document templates and choosing that and then putting the mail merges in and hitting a button, that's not the fastest way anymore. Right. So when we go into agencies and they're like, we need this process, a lot of times what we have to do is translate that into, well, what is that? Because if I built you that process now, the agency down the street that knows how to use Claude is going to build the other one and they're going to be 16 times faster than you. And you're going to be pissed because you just spent a bunch of money building a process that is no longer necessary. So this piece of when I say like these micro processes, a lot of times insurance and bless us all. I mean, I was there, like we are so rigid in our SOPs. We know how to process these things. We've been doing them for 40, 50 years in a lot of agencies, even more, some 100 years, right? This is the process. We write it down on the paper. We put in the person's name. We send it in the mail or email and we get it back. And then we move through this process. And I think what AI is teaching us now, that fundamental process for the first time in insurance is changing.
You're blowing my mind already. I have like no clue what you're talking about even here.
There was just a good example of like, hey, we think we know what we're asking our technology partners to design, right? When we go in and we look for AMSs or we look for these tools, we have a preconceived notion as insurance people what we're expecting to see. And that is changing, I think, right now.
And that's the point. I love it because this is where my mind is. I think I know what I need.
Yeah.
Now here comes Margot and she's like, "Okay, no, you don't need that because that's not gonna exist even." But that is very rare because so many people would come and listen to what I think I need and will tell me, yes, we can do it. So, what you're offering as Iris, as InsurTech, what you've said, it's not only a platform, but it's also a consultancy and kind of creating that vision together with your
We had
clients.
to.
That's golden. That's golden.
We had to, we launched and, the typical B2B SaaS software company, and we all deal with them every day, is like, here's your software, turn it on, here's some training material, go. Which again, if we had built something that everyone was used to using and that old sort of way of thinking, probably would be a successful business. But when we launched Iris, and that one example I gave you of like the shift of how you actually are going to do work, we realized really quickly, oh my God, like we're never going to make it. Right? Like we're never going to make it because this technology that we're providing, there's an education leap that has to come with it outside of just here's the technology. We hope you can make it work. And I think that that is probably one of the biggest differentiators for us. I actually think it's a really good, if there's anybody out there listening that wants to learn how to take insurance processes and translate them into technology using AI, there's probably a whole consultancy somewhere that's going to pop up that's going to be wildly successful in doing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
because there's so much learning and it is moving so fast. And the other thing is, we're insurance operators. We're not software engineers and we don't want to be. And that's the other sort of line in the sand I keep seeing when I'm talking to these agencies and brokerages. They're like, look, we just want to do what we do, which is build relationships, sell insurance, manage that process for our carrier partners. We don't want to have to become a full-blown full stack engineering and software company.
Absolutely not. I can confirm that. With that said, there is that saying, everyone is now in technology business.
Everybody's in the software
Mm.
business, whether they know it or not.
That's how we feel
Yeah.
because that's yeah.
Well, focusing on that, so there's a way to get around that. Obviously, I do believe there's gonna be new jobs created inside the insurance agency and brokerage that is that strategy piece, that is that out and not necessarily how it becomes technical, but what is it that the business is driving towards? And if you thought about the example I just gave, document gen as a good example, that is not tell me your process, Nina. That is tell me your business outcome. And so if the business outcome is my people need to be able to fill out forms 50% faster, right? That as opposed to saying we need mail merge and document templates and all the like, so if you're focusing on the outcome, so there's a new role emerging in these insurance brokerages, which is somebody who is very tightly aligned with ops and tightly aligned with the C-suite, if you will, if we have that inside the agency, that is taking the goal of the directive of the company and translating it into what is the business outcome needed to achieve that. That ops role is changing. I mean, that is a huge shift in ops that we're seeing on the insurance side. So again, Nina coming to me as a provider and saying, "Hey, I don't care how I want this to be done the most effective way, but what I need is my people to spend 30% less time generating documents." That's an outcome, not a directive, not an SOP. So the same thing with we have a really good agency that's good at verbalizing this that said to me, "Hey, we have right now our CSRs can handle 200,000 in revenue, meaning like that what they handle in
Mhm,
their book is 200,000.
mhm.
In order for us to hit our goals of margin, we need that to be 500,000. Can you do that?" I love that as a provider because I can now I'm your technical expertise here. I can tell you the best way to achieve that margin increase, and that's gonna make you happy if I hit that margin increase, right? Like, that's what you're looking for. But the harder one is when you get the agencies in, like I said, and they say, well, if they don't say I wanna increase margin or I wanna, make more efficiency on my CSR, they say, "Show me how you do download suspense," which is another area that's gonna get totally disrupted by AI at the moment, right? I need to know how does the suspense look and how do I match it and how do I unmatch it and how do I and I'm like, "Whoa, whoa." Like you're so in the weeds on that request. What is it that's driving that request? Why are you asking me about that? Do you have a data quality problem with your download? Great. How is the business being affected by that? Do we now have 10 people doing suspense? Are we outsourcing that to Resource Pro and spending $5,000 a month? Okay, then that's the business outcome that we need to solve, not that you need the suspense itself, right? I'm challenging operational leaders to come to me and come to Iris and tell me what you need and let us collaboratively find this solution for you as opposed to the other way around. If
Love
that
this approach.
Yes.
This is great. Awesome. Margo, I started the Insurance Leaders Lab podcast about a year ago, and the focus was on leadership and personal fulfillment. And over the year, I realized that there is a major shift that we are talking about at the moment.
Yes.
Literally, every leadership panel is talking about digital transformation and innovation. And the number of AI demos I personally looked at in the last 6 months, I mean, they are through the roof.
Yes.
With that said, the paradox is that the more information I have, the less certain I feel about my next steps.
Exactly.
And I think many operational leaders are in the same boat with
Right.
me at the moment. And that's the main reason why I decided to focus on the tech series for the podcasting. Because with the help of exceptional experts like you are, I want to explore how we can move forward, how I, as an operation leader, can move forward, what I need to focus now, and what are my next steps.
I think we talked about this briefly when we met in St. Pete. And I'm going to keep driving this home. It's not the technology. Here's what I'll tell you. The technology can do anything you need it. Like the tech is so good and it's moving so fast that there's nothing that it really can't solve at this point in time, right? So when you have so much choice and decision fatigue, I always like to go back to building the foundation. So technically, you need to build a strong technical foundation. I think we all know that. We've all heard that a million times from everybody. But what I wrote about not that long ago was how to design a resilient insurance agency and how, before you even talk about technology, understanding like what does it mean to live in a time where change is the norm? And insurance people, we are just not built this way. And it took a long time for me. And I even struggle with it inside of Iris. And we're a software company. We're not even an insurance company anymore. We're a software company, but how do you build a company where change is expected and it's embraced and it's treated as a force multiplier instead of something to try to mitigate? We are risk mitigators by nature. And so our whole lives, all we
The
have done is
world is upside down,
it's
totally.
upside down for us insurance people. Like it's just really difficult for us to wrap our brains around. But like risk mitigation in the past has always been, you have a very rigid set of rules, and anything that falls outside of that is considered dangerous, right? Because it's unknown. The unknown equals risk. That's how we've always thought about risk. That is completely upside down in this world that we live in. We have nothing but risk. Nothing but change. If you think about the last 10 years have been so insane. So if instead of trying to rigidly protect ourselves against these things that are inevitably going to happen, how do you build a company where it can thrive in chaos, in uncertainty, living in the gray? And a lot of people don't do well. So again, there's another skill set that's emerging here that I think insurance agencies and brokerages really need to start thinking about hiring for or embracing, which is this: can you live in the gray? Can you operate when things are not black and white? And insurance is black and white, but it is not black and white anymore. And so building a resilient company, specifically when it comes to tech, and I have 5 points here when it comes to tech, is stop thinking of tech as a one-time project. Like we're going to implement this tool or we're going to build an AMS, whatever it is. Thinking about this linearly is wrong. Technology should be a part of your budget. It should be a part of your quarterly planning. There should always be an iteration and a feedback loop that you're building when it comes to tech. And doing that, the second point is building rollbacks when you're going to hit a roadblock. That's what we talked about. It's like, how do you know? How do you plan for inevitability that you're going to mess up? And I said this earlier, like, I'm going to roll something out. It's not going to work. I'm going to roll it out. It's going to break. I'm going to roll it out. My people are going to revolt. Like any time I'm rolling out anything new or I'm changing people or I'm getting them in that change mindset, you've got to have a backup plan, a strategy around what happens if it doesn't work. And we all like to plan for the perfect go live of this tool, and we rarely put energy into figuring out, okay, if it doesn't work, what's our process if it doesn't work? How do we roll it back?
I have to say, I read your white paper
Oh, you did? Okay.
and I think it's brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And I actually shared it with all my team leaders immediately once I have it. And I'm going to have a conversation with them about that specifically, like to dedicate time to talk just about that, because I think that's so important. That is a thinking shift that
Yeah.
we need to get it here first. I need to understand it. Well, I do understand it, but I want to operationalize, if you
Yeah,
wish.
you have to put it
Yeah.
into existence. You have to
Yeah. What does that
execute.
really mean? That second point that you're making, prepare your backup plan. That's easy said,
It's not as easy done. I
right?
do agree.
Right. So, because is there always a possibility to have that backup plan?
Absolutely. I like doing examples because sometimes I think that helps, like, marry this sort of concept into reality. We had a go live with a client, and this client was really bought into my backup plan. So we were doing an API integration into a third party software that, sometimes you don't have control over. I'm sure anybody who's done this has done it. And I said, okay, what's the backup plan? We have this backup plan where we have a spreadsheet. And if the things don't roll the way they need to, my team knows that they enter the information in and then they copy it into the backup plan, right? This is not technically advanced, but just the notion for her team that, one, it was okay if this didn't work the way we anticipated the first time. The culture and the signaling from executive to those teams said, hey, if things mess up, your job's not on the line. We're not going to be mad at you.
Yeah.
We're not looking at you as a failure because this thing didn't go the way we planned. Yes, this is stinky and you got to copy it, but relax. This is part of evolving. This is part of growing in technology. Sometimes things don't always go the way they will be. Your job is safe. We have a backup plan. You're not going to get in trouble if something's missed. This is part of it. Just having the plan culturally relaxed the team. And anybody who's ever done this with insurance people know that change management and people management is a huge part of this.
Of course. Yeah.
Just giving the team the reassurance that not everything is peachy. And if it doesn't break, we'll figure it out together. And what she actually did was set up a Teams channel. And inevitably, when the API went down on the third party provider side, it went down for a couple hours. There was no freak out. The team just went into the channel and said, hey, looks like the API is down. And she said, hey, enact plan B, get out your spreadsheets. We'll deal with the time when the data wasn't flowing. It was a couple hours and then they were back up and running. And then they took the spreadsheets and somebody entered them in over the weekend and bada bing, we're done. But I think about what I've seen implementations of software that have not gone well and them not having this backup plan. It's like pure chaos. The data's not going. What do we do? Nobody knows where to go. Nobody knows who to talk to about it. Just having the plan was like 90% of that battle.
Okay,
Right?
okay. I understand it better now. What you mean by saying have a backup plan is here are our steps if here is what we do. So it's not necessarily, okay, we have a different solution here, but it's more of a calming the chaos
Right.
of not knowing what to do.
When you're talking about the implementation and iteration of software or a new process that you're building with technology, just having that plan for your people helps the process immensely. Hopefully, you never have
Got
to
it.
use it, but if you
Mhm.
do, there's not chaos and pandemonium. And by the way, your staff doesn't feel that it was a failure, which is rule number 4 on my thing, which is teaching your team that change is the job and not framing mess up or an mitigated thing that happened as a failure. Because we know that when you're changing and you're building new processes, there's going to be things that are not going to work the first time. And so people understanding that their job's not in jeopardy, that they're not gonna get written up, you know what I mean? Because some process that was designed, frankly, by somebody else isn't that CSR's fault that it didn't pan out the way that it wanted to. So that brings a lot of stability as well when you're doing change a lot.
Okay. Okay. So we talked about rule number 1, stop running technology as a one-time project.
Yes, please.
Rule number 2, build rollbacks before you build rules. Rule number 4, teach your team that change is the job. I loved it.
Yes.
Let's talk about rule number 3.
Fix the core before you automate. And that goes into what we were just talking about earlier, which is you really have to understand what you're trying to accomplish before you can automate something. Knowing the goal is so critical now with AI and automation at the speed it's going, because you can now really mess up. The speed at which AI can work, especially if you're building agentic flows, which almost all the big agencies now that we're talking to are implementing some sort of process around agentic AI. Even the mid tiers are doing the same thing actually right now. So when you have 17 AI agents that are running full stop without sleep and eating in 24 hours, you can automate a bad thing real fast, right? Like you can do some serious damage. So it's really important, one, the testing environment, but number three is fixing the core before you automate around it. Being really clear on what you are trying to accomplish, and also making sure that your data and your operating system and the place where all this is originating and ending is tight. You've got the right data in there. You've got governance around those things, that it's trackable and traceable. Those are things that are really key for rule number three. I do this all the time for the clients that come in. For a tech company CEO to advocate for less automation is pretty strange. But when we start working with a client, I'm really hesitant to roll out 72-step agentic AI processes on a first pass. It really needs to be tight, and then you build upon that, and that's what fixing the core sort of three is
Okay.
all about. Yeah,
So give me an example, please, here.
sure.
Let's say you're coming in and you're looking at the data. What would be three core metrics that will help you to define whether the data is accurate or not?
Let me just say that 90% of the time the data is not accurate. We know this. We know that, and a lot of that is driven by the data model that we're using in legacy software. It was a big deal for us to change. So I like to describe it as policy centric instead of customer centric. So for us on the insurance distribution side, we're relationship driven. We aren't policy admin, we're not carriers, right? Like we aren't actually owning the policy. We're selling on the behalf of someone else. So our whole business model is driven around humans and human relationships. And then there's a policy potentially, right? Or coverage at the end of that rainbow that then needs to be managed and serviced. But it's a cyclical life cycle, right? For the policy, because you can lose a policy midterm, just like you can lose a policy at renewal, just like you can lose it when you're trying to write it for the first time. So the data model that we're all operating on is fundamentally broken. It was driven and created mainly for carriers that then has been adopted for distribution. So you'll see a policy at the center, and then a policy will have a contact or a first named insured, sometimes just a first named insured, not even enough space for additional named insureds. And then there's some light information about that company or that person in that contact, like the contact context. And that's it. Well, if we're a relationship company, not a policy company, and we want to accurately track data, I want to know all about my customer, where their kids go to school, where they participate in the community, do they own other businesses, do they sit on boards? That's how I grow organic sales as a sales organization. And so when I look at the core of these systems and I don't see that anywhere, I'm concerned that I don't have the right data to even feed into an AI or an automation machine to give me the output I'm looking for. So one of the first things we did is we flipped the data model from policy centric to person centric or customer centric. And we collect a lot of data on those relationships between people, the relationships between people and companies. And once we have mapped all of that out, now I can understand if I'm writing a policy for Nina and she's a high net worth client and I've got a auto, boat, and her properties, but she doesn't have an umbrella. Well, now I understand holistically how Nina needs to be insured. But if I'm only looking at Nina in terms of how she relates to a single policy, then I'm only seeing you through that lens. You're my insurance agent and you can't recognize that. How are you really doing relationships? So if you go back to your software and you don't understand that person and their relationship, not just to a policy, but to the other people in your business and to each other, I don't understand how you're going to layer AI in there and have it be intelligent. It can't. It's not omnipresent, right? So if you don't have that data, you can't automate correctly off of it. And that was a big deal about fixing the core. That's where rule 3 came from.
Okay. So if I do not have that data in my today's AMS, how do we close that bridge?
Duh, Nina, you have to get Iris. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, you do wherever you My pitch there would be wherever you can find a place to house that information, you need to start housing it. Because if we're learning anything about AI,
Okay.
and this is generative AI, not just agentic AI, but even just I'm chatting with an AI agent. We all know now the more accurate the knowledge base that that AI has, the better that output is going to be. And so we're doing it inside of Iris. I'm now mandating it inside of the insurance agency. We are building knowledge centers. And those knowledge centers are not just the data that's coming from the AMS. We're building SharePoints and folders and how we operate. We actually built one inside of Iris called Ask Iris. It's just a GPT, but that Ask Iris on the back end of it has the entire company information about our product, our sales process, our customers, how we like to respond, what our SOPs are and time limits and SLAs. It's got this knowledge center. So when anybody inside of Iris needs something, product notes or an answer to a question if they're new hire, they go to Ask Iris first. This is the kind of data base that an agency needs to start thinking about formulating. So data in a database, which is your AMS or your Excel
Mhm.
sheets or wherever you're keeping that, but then also your unstructured data, your documents are getting ready to be incredibly valuable. Documents used to be something we just attached in a folder somewhere and we'd have to look it up if we didn't want to, or
Mhm.
we go to the carrier's website. The most dangerous thing right now that I am hearing insurance agents say and do is we don't need that information. It lives on the carrier's website. I'm
Oh,
dying.
I heard that so
Cannot.
many times.
What do you mean? This is your business. This is your proprietary business information. And you are not going to be able to use a chat bot. Well, you might be able to, but it's really advanced. But to go into the carrier site every time you're going to burn all your tokens to figure out the answer to the question that you should already have in your own knowledge center. The days of that, like that process for personal lines agencies in particular, where they said, oh, we'll just do everything in a CRM and we'll bind on the carrier's website and we'll just let the download populate the data. Oh my, oh my. How the AI breaks that process.
I just
That
learned
is
something
that is a
here. Oh my
dangerous
God.
process. That's probably one of the biggest for personal lines agency shifts that
Mhm.
they're starting to realize those have built that. It makes sense, right? Because personal lines is highly transactional.
Totally.
I get it. And they want to streamline the process. But think about all of the information that you now no longer have in that process. Until the policy binds and you get it through the download, what about all the
Yeah.
personal information and the quote time and what carriers rated what and who came back with what and what you actually presented versus what you bound versus what stayed in the
Yeah.
pipeline? I mean, all of that data gone. You don't have it. So you can't run any process on it. You can't automate any of it. You can't analyze any of it.
Okay. Personal lines leaders, something for you to think about. Let's
It's
move
of
on.
all the fundamental shifts, Nina, I told you there, it's really fundamentally changing.
Yeah. So, rule number 5.
How fast can you adjust?
How fast can you adjust? Talk to me a little bit about that.
This one was actually hard fundamentally for me to change too. It's like we're really good at measuring, especially ops people who are very analytic. How long did it take to get this quote back? How long did this sit in what stage in the CRM? These are very easy sort of metrics. And those measure efficiency. They measure like, you said you were going to do a thing, it took you this long to do the thing. It's very black and white. But how fast can you change? Like, how fast can your organization, Travelers wakes up tomorrow in Florida and says, we're not writing personal auto anymore. And you have 80% Travelers auto. How fast can your company adjust to something that big? In Florida, we might be better equipped because we are dealing with hurricanes a lot. So
Every
things like moratoriums and we can't write today, and then we got to do the backup audits. Like we're kind of used to the shift in that when we have big storms come. Same thing in California, we have fires, the same thing happens. But if you wanted to make a directional decision as a company tomorrow, how fast would it take the person at the very bottom of your totem pole to adjust to that change? So the way that we see it now is directive comes out, we're going to start writing life. We don't write life now. We want to write life. We want to go comb through our personal auto, our personal lines of business. We're going to cross sell life. Here's how we're going to do it. So how that works today is somebody at the top makes that decision. It gets passed to me and Nina and ops. We design a whole rollout of this initiative, right? How we're going to train on it, that we got to adjust all of the systems. Then typically what happens is we send out an email blast and we say, we're doing this thing. And it takes 6 months for the thing to really show any type of fruitful, right? Like the way that this is changing is so fundamental because The tracking of how fast you can move these initiatives through an organization could be simply how fast can we get a change in our workflow? So if your system is designed and you have these large, broad workflows, but then something happens and that workflow needs to change, it could
Mhm.
be as simple as Nina going in, talking to that in the future, my 5-year projection, you're talking to an AI agent and you say, guess what? We're writing life now. I need you to adjust these 5 workflows. Here's what I need the workflow to look like. The AI goes in and adjusts it. Your person logs in the next day and they're being taken through the workflow, the system, the technology is leading that change, not the SOP in the email that you sent out that does now in 5 new steps. So how fast can that organization pivot? And in insurance, for us providers, like our distribution partners, like that's critical because we don't always get heads up when something like a book roll needs to happen or somebody's entering or exiting a market or there's some new product now that we can sell that is going to be great and make us a bunch of money. The speed in which you can adjust, to me, there's a true operational ROI there. If you can sell the product 6 months faster, you've got 6 months more of that revenue coming in. There is a true dollar amount associated with being able to do that. That's
Mm.
becoming really important now that things are moving fast. If Nina's agency can implement that, but the agency down the street takes 8 months to implement it, that's a big that could potentially be a big ROI for Nina. So that's how I feel about that one.
Yeah, interesting. And then it goes to the same kind of loop. And I like that you introduced that simple operational tool framework at the end of your white paper, which is build, run, check, and change. That loop where it's
Yes,
like, okay, it's all about change management,
all
essentially.
about change management in the future.
And
Yes.
it's especially is important because we still are in people business and people are, even if there are more and more agentic AI coming in and helping us, there still will be people, right?
There
I
will
mean, I'm
always be people.
always
There will
be
always
people.
be people.
Exactly.
There will. Yes.
And they could be the catalysts and they also could be the ones who are
The
slow
detractors.
slow adapting, right?
Yes.
So this is the challenge from the whole industry perspective,
The
especially
HR side
insurance
of it.
agents.
Yeah.
How do we get them move
Agent
forward?
agencies
Yeah.
are not gonna like it. They're not gonna like the answer. We have been
Yeah.
living in the golden age of insurance agencies for, I think, for at least the last 20 or 30 years, which is like we had to do very little as far as org management, as far as ops. So you could, I mean, some of the best agencies were fully born from sales. They just sold a bunch of insurance, had great sales leaders, and they just grew and grew and grew. And now a lot of them are having to operationalize, and that's very difficult to do, but you're going to have to budget. Like if you like there's a capital expenditure here that I don't think people are talking about. And it's true capital expenditure. It's we're going to invest in a new group of skill sets. We're going to invest in a new technology. We're going to marry that together. We're going to track the ROI over 5 years and then our margin's going to change in year 3. Like these are the types of conversations that Nina, I know you're doing in ops, but that are happening at the high level. I think the fallacy is that there's no monetary budget required for this
At the moment,
at the moment.
I mean, some people do. It's probably is a separate thing for your employees' training and development. There's always been a budget, and then the technology, and those are becoming more and more closely interacted.
They are. Yeah.
And yeah, because we can spend a lot of money on technology, but if it's not being used,
It doesn't
it's
matter.
just
It's
wasted.
not gonna work.
It's just wasted.
The human side, and that's what I mean by looking at the skill set, and I'll send you the paper that I'm writing because it's been ruminating in my brain of like, what are we gonna need in 5 years from the people who work for us and in insurance? And it is so drastically different because what we have now is sort of this inverse pyramid of like worker at the bottom, and a lot of these people at the bottom in these mid-bottom tiers of their data entry, their data capture, they're filling out forms, they're moving
Yep.
things from one
Yep.
place to the
Yep.
other. And then at the top, we have sort of this like systems thinking and operational thinking. And I think we're going to flip that where you're going to have very few of those roles on data and moving and entry. You're going to have a lot of people down here that conceptually understand how to run a business. And they're going to have their little agent. They're
Cool.
going to be the drivers. And then they're going to have their own, like at Iris, we're starting to build everybody at Iris as a chief of staff.
And
So
I love that
yeah,
because at the end of the day, these are the people who are on the ground.
yes,
They know better and they understand the needs of the clients. And if we think about insurance, the whole idea of insurance is to provide our insureds with solutions that they need. So, this customer client centric focus, let's bring it back. I'm all for it.
let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
No pressure, just
Okay.
need to change everything about insurance. It's fine. We'll be fine in 5 years.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Margot, we are at the end of our conversation. I would love to ask you more questions. Maybe we need to schedule another one
Do a follow-up.
podcast in a few months to follow up. But for now, what would be your best advice for leaders leading insurance agencies today? If you could suggest one thing that they need to ramp up as soon as possible, what would that be?
It's that person that you're sitting next to that can translate what you need into technology. I mean, I love that there's gonna be a whole consulting firm somewhere made up of that, but I'm encouraging my former agency to do and the agency that I sit on the board right now, the number one thing I'm telling them is you need to find people who can bridge the gap between what you are doing today and what will be happening tomorrow. And a lot of the rules that I wrote out, the top 5 rules, those are things you need to look for in that person or that group of people, those skill sets. Are they comfortable living in the gray? Do they know how to roll back thing? Like, can they iterate? Can they do that operational circle really well? Can they buy something, implement it, change it, fix it, do it again? Are they comfortable in that loop? There are so few of those inside insurance companies right now that the ones that you find, you need to hold on to them and start designing pathways for that skill set to rise up.
Yeah.
Give them a path to C-suite, give them a path to excellence, just like you would a sales path, right? We need to start designing those things for those individuals that show aptitude for that because they are going to hold this thing together as we move through the next
Yeah.
5 years of change.
Excellent advice. Margot, thank you very much
Thank
for
you, Nina.
this fantastic conversation. If our listeners would like to learn more about you, where could they find more information?
LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and then iriscloud.com, IRYS, iriscloud.com is our website, and we post all of the white papers that come out from our leaders there. We have an insights tab where we do a lot of exercises, white papers, information, just not even about Iris, just about the industry in general and things that we're trends that we're seeing. So that's a really good resource.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
Margot.
Thank you,
It
Nina.
was a
Thank you
pleasure
for the
talking to
podcast.
you. That was wonderful conversation. Thank you for your insights and have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Bye.